So in 2009, I attended the University of South Florida as a freshman. I remember my first 2 years, I didn't really get much playing time. Everything I did, whether it was sprints, whether it was in the gym lifting weights, I mean, every single competition, everything, I did it 110% because I really had something to prove. For the first time in my life, even though I worked so hard, it didn't matter. I was a bench player. So I was really pushed in that sense like I never was before, because I really had to deserve even 5 minutes of game time. So it didn't matter what I was told, I just did it. I just did it to the best of my ability. Whether it was harmful or beneficial didn't matter. I had full trust in whatever the program was doing at that college, and I did it. Whether it was lifting maximum weights in the gym, upper body, lower body, any body part, didn't matter how many days before the game it was, how many days after the game it was, how many trainings we had done. I just did it. I just did everything max. Everything max. That was my mindset. Especially having to prove something, that I deserved to be there and that I deserved to get game time and that I deserved to start eventually. I remember within the second year, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was the second year, probably my third year there too. We we were given a goal at some point to increase our maximum weight of bench press and squats by 2.5 pounds a week or 5 pounds a week. It was one of the two. I don't remember which one it was. But we were to literally increase our max of bench press and squats to 2.5 or 5 pounds a week. I don't remember what it was. And like I said, in doing this, I just did everything I could to the max. It didn't matter whether I was a soccer player or whether our trainer was specialized in football training. And when I say football, I'm talking about NFL football players, which he was. He was an NFL, or he was a football training coach. That was his specialty. He didn't have any background in soccer, so he just trained us the way he thought he should. And I just did it. I just followed it. Didn't matter. And you gotta remember, so we have the same trainer who's a football coach and a soccer coach, which I don't think really is a problem. I think the problem is after the fact, after I was doing this, the problem is when the coach doesn't have a background in soccer, doesn't have much knowledge in soccer. So a lot of the things we were doing replicating the football players. Maybe it wasn't exact, but a lot of the things are the same. For example, when we're being told that we got to lift 2.5 to 5 pounds increasing every week, then that tells you that's definitely has nothing to do with soccer. That has everything to do with football. So these are the things we were doing. Everything was more. So this is what I did. And this is just to let you know why I had changed my approach after doing it like this for a while. So you also got to remember, in American football and in soccer, it's two completely different ways of movement. In football, a lot of the movements that runners do, it's really you're running straight and then you make a quick turn. You do occasionally have plays where you go in and out at very short points, but a lot of it is you run straight, you make a sharp turn. You run straight, you make a sharp turn. Whereas in soccer, it's like this. Especially depending on the position you play, a lot of it is side movement, side bursting, side to side, backwards, short, a lot of short bursts. So especially depending on your style of play, at least for me particular, with the short steps that I take. A lot of my play is side to side, short burst. I'm not like a wing back running for long periods at a time. But even saying that, the majority of runs as a soccer player is generally short bursts, a couple meters, maybe 5 meters on average. I'm talking about really fast. But and then we're also having to carry our weight over a long period of time. So the heavier you are, the harder that is. The lighter you are, the easier it is to carry that weight. So these are things that I didn't take into consideration until my third and fourth year in college. I think it must have been like the middle of my junior year, the middle of my third year, or the very beginning of the season, that I actually, I don't want to call it rebelling, but I no longer was lifting the heavy weights. I no longer wanted to do max weights because I was thinking, I'm a soccer player. I don't need to keep lifting weights and increasing my weight every single week. I don't need to be doing max reps. I don't need to be doing max weight. These are not things I need to be doing as a soccer player. So this is some, and I, at the time, if I'm not mistaken, I was the only one who was making it very apparent that I was no longer gonna be doing this, because in my first 2 years and maybe the beginning of the third year, I was making a big name for myself amongst the team as far as my effort in the weight room. So when you're up there, like every time you go in the weight room, it's like, oh, Kevin, what are you gonna do today? Like, we know you're gonna give it your all in terms of every max you did. And then all of a sudden I said, I'm not gonna do this anymore. So even if I wasn't telling them outright I'm rebelling, I cut down everything. I cut it down, and then obviously it was just apparent at that point what I was doing. I really couldn't hide from it. And then once it becomes a pattern, then they ask, oh, what's wrong? But this is something I became very aware of, and I knew that this would be destructive to my body as a soccer player long term. And something I really question is how useful weights are as a soccer player. So on one hand, I have heard soccer players who have used it, and especially in today's modern game, it's a big part of the game, especially at the highest level. A lot of players lifting weights. I think it's probably standard at this point. And then obviously when players are lifting weights, they're getting stronger. The game gets more physical because now people want to use their weight. And when they do use their weight, it's a lot stronger than it was before. Now, I look at some of the athletes that I've read about or that I've listened to, and two of them that I want to talk about are Michael Jordan and Cristiano Ronaldo. Now, starting off with Michael Jordan, I know at the beginning of his career, he was this is a guy who was physically gifted. And I know at the beginning of his career, up until I think a few years, maybe 4, 5, 6 years into the NBA in his career, he hadn't been lifting weights at all. Now, there was one team in particular where physically he wasn't able to handle it, just because the beating, not so much because he wasn't strong enough, but just because of what the league was allowing at that point as far as physicality. His body couldn't take it. So over the years, he began lifting weights, and as he was lifting weights, he began to endure the type of beating that he was getting, and he could enforce it on other people. And throughout this time, he actually started winning championships. Now, is it all lifting weights? No, there's other things that came into play, but lifting weights didn't stop him from lifting championships. That much we know, and I'm pretty sure it helped him based on his account and his trainer. And we know the rest from there as far as Michael Jordan is concerned. And he gained a considerable amount of weight. I mean, we're not just talking 5 pounds. I want to say at least 15 pounds he gained at the very least. And this was when he was winning and winning and winning. Now, I look at Cristiano Ronaldo, and this is a very, very interesting one to me. I look at Ronaldo when he was 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. Then I noticed, to be specific, in season 2013 to 2014, I noticed that dribbling was almost I wouldn't say almost eliminated, but it was a drastic decrease from what he had been doing before. When he dribbled, he was no longer beating players like he did before. Now his a lot of it is based on speed and pace, but at this time he was still in his late 20s. So it's not like he was in his mid 30s at this point. He was in his late 20s, and I noticed in his dribbling something wasn't right. He wasn't beating players like he used to with the same ease. And I did notice his posture was a lot stiff when he did moves. He wasn't as agile as he was when he was in his mid 20s and teens. And he was still in his late 20s, and he was still at a very good physical shape. And from this point, I think it was 27, 28, he went down considerably. However, his strength was going up. Now, he was always strong, but his strength was going up. It wasn't going down. It was definitely going up. So at this point, this is when around this time, he was beginning to jump higher. His max pace was going up, and his agility was going down. So, and then over time, obviously, it got noticeably worse and worse for me. If you look at Ronaldo before 2013 and after 2013, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm pretty sure he was in his late 20s. So he kept lifting weights. He was getting stronger. And as someone who dribbled a lot, I just noticed it was going down. So I was like, man, can weights really be this harmful to your game, especially when you're an agile player? It would be one thing if he was a brute force up front or a center back or a defensive mid, but this was an agile player. So that really questioned, should I prioritize lifting weights? And I hate to bring this up because it'll bring up the comparisons about who's the best and all that, but I look at a player like Messi, and as the dribbler that he is, this is not someone who really in his career, he was always strong. I remember 18, 19, he was always a strong player, but he never really prioritized gaining weight. Maybe he did lift weights, maybe he used body resistance, maybe he used bands, but his agility never really went down as far as him being stiff. So I'm assuming that he didn't lift weights, but I'm not 100% sure. But I just noticed between him and Ronaldo, he was still able to dribble, and he's still dribbling now, and he's in his mid 30s pretty much, and he still has that agility to dribble players. And then I also look at another set of players, two to be exact, are Fernandinho and N'Golo Kante. You look at the stature of these players are very small. They're not built in any form or fashion as far as when you look at someone like Cristiano Ronaldo. But when you look at the strength of these players, it is just immaculate. Fernandinho and N'Golo Kante are some of the strongest players in the game, and they are very small. And I don't know if they lift weights or not as much as they can. But when you look at the size of these players, it almost seems as if a lot of the strength they have was really natural. So they were just born with these natural gifts, and then maybe they've enhanced it. But that's another thing. So I just look at their size, and now some players are small and they don't have that strength. Some players are bigger and they don't have that strength. But some players are small and they have that strength, and that's actually been kind of how I've been growing up until this point. Even as small as I am, strength has never been an issue as far as having to handle physicality, being pushed around. That's never happened in my game at this point. Even at the college level, like I said, I was making that adjustment. That had more to do with the pace of the game than the weights, the strength. The strength was never an issue. So I look at players like that and I'm like, man, that makes me really want to stick to just doing body weight and bands. If I do anything at this point, I'm only doing body weight, but that just, when I look at those players, I'm like, man, depending on certain natural gifts that you have, and I don't know, maybe if I go at a higher and higher level, maybe I'll need to lift weights. Maybe the physicality will be too much if I keep going at the next level. But for now, I stick to body weights, and I stick to bands. And then another thing is, there's a NFL football player called Tom Brady. And this is a player who I believe is now 42 years old, 41, 42 years old. And when I was introduced to the type of workout that he does and how he speaks about it, so much of it is about, it's not how you look, it's about how you feel. Key word, how you feel, not how you look. And then another thing that he emphasizes is, a lot of people, when they're doing weights, they want to do weights to the max to finish it, instead of doing what's optimal for the sport they're playing. So that's another thing that I take into consideration, is, are you doing the weights that are optimal for your sport, or are you just lifting weights just to lift weights? So depending on what your position demands and what your role is in the game and what the game is, depends on what type of workouts you need to do. If you're a quarterback, you don't need to do the same workouts as an offensive lineman. You don't need to have the same goals as an offensive lineman. Same thing in soccer. There's certain things you need to work on, and you do need to build strength in your core. I've come to believe that core is very important, having a very strong core, but not maxing weight and maxing reps. Now, when I say this, I'm not saying this as an expert. I'm not saying this as someone who's done tons and tons of studies about this. Everything that I'm saying here is based on observation, not only from the players that I've mentioned, but also players that I've played with over several years. So I'm 30 now, and I've been very close to the game since I was maybe 7 years old, but I keep tabs on players I've played with, and I make observations of players that I watch at the highest level over the years. So I just look at patterns, I look at things, and I try to make sense of it based on that. I am by no means a master or knowledgeable of the science and the actual facts of health. I have heard that genetics can play a big part in how people age and their physicality. I have heard of that, so I know that much, or I've heard that much. But everything else, just to make note, is just observations that I've made, and this is something that I will stick with for now. Body weights and resistance until I ever reach a point where I feel weights are needed. I'm not gonna do it because I feel good. What I'm doing helps me as far as the way that I play. It doesn't hinder it. So there's no point of me to change at this point. So I would just probably, now that I'm actually saying that, I would probably say as a player, don't even start lifting weights until you reach a point where weights are needed. Because there's a few people that may never have to get to that point. They can just do body weight, band work, and then there are other players who at some point the physicality is too much and they'll need to lift weights. And a lot of it too, I think also is it's how you play the game. Some people play a game that, or a position or a role on a team where more physicality is needed than others. But I'm just a proponent, especially in the game of soccer, that you do want to do exercises that like help your balance, strengthen your core, but I would say stay away from weights until you are at a point where you realize you need it.